You know, everybody talks about Wander Franco, but just how good is this kid going to be? Welcome to Fantasy Baseball today on a Thursday, November 12th. Want to wish a happy Veterans Day to all of our servicemen and women out there. Frank Sample joined as always by Scott White. We just wrapped up our first mock draft of the offseason. We will talk about that on a podcast next week, but Scott, honestly, it was weird. It was very weird.
It was weird. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, we've been talking about how it's going to be so difficult to evaluate every player because there's so little data to go on, and the temptation is to weigh it like a full season when really you shouldn't. And if you did, then a lot of the standbys like, Javier Baez, JD Martinez, etc., would just get buried. And, they obviously didn't go as high as they were coming into 2020. They fell quite a bit. But, if we were treating 2020 like a full-length season, they would drop even more.
And something I never thought I would write in a chat in a mock draft was, wow, this is the riskiest mock draft team that I've ever drafted. So it's just going to be fun to talk about that coming up next week. If you couldn't tell by our open, we are talking about prospects on the show today. And while Scott knows his fair share, shout out to Alec Boehm. He's looking pretty good so far. We wanted to bring somebody on who really knows his prospects, is well-versed in fantasy baseball, and is fun. Welcome back to the show, Chris Welsh, a.k.a. The Welsh. What's going on, buddy?
My buddies, Frankie Stamps, Scotty White. These are my people. I'm glad to be back. Thank you guys for having me, especially to talk about prospects. And that Wander Franco. That's what we were talking about before. We're going to talk about Wander and Boehm. I miss talking all the prospects with you too, Scotty. So you definitely hold your own.
Yeah. No, I miss it. I miss it too. It's good to have the Welsh back.
Thank you. And using my formal name too. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's like the Ohio State University. It's the Welsh.
Yeah, the Edge. Exactly.
Did you change that on the birth certificate officially or what?
Oh no, I didn't have to change it. Legal name, the Welsh. That would be my full Christian name there, the Welsh. So I appreciate you guys. No, I mean, at this point, I'm more apt to respond to you for the Welsh than I am my actual name. When someone calls me Chris, it's like your mother using, your full name. I'm like, whoa, who do you think you are talking to me like that with a Chris?
That's like me getting in trouble as a kid. My mom's like, Frank Anthony. She would always hit the middle name, right? Frank Anthony, hand me that shoe. And as a kid, I'm like, all right, hand her the shoe. And she's like, just throw it at me. So I would hand her the, whatever. And she would just throw it at me. And I'm just like, all right, well, Frank Anthony, if you ever heard that, it's bad. If you hear Chris Welsh, you know that he's in trouble. If you've listened to this podcast over the past 365 days, longer than that, you know who the Welsh is. He used to host the podcast here towards the end of last season and in the off season as well. So we welcome him back to the show. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at @IsItTheWelsh. True story. Someone has asked me in the past, why is his Twitter handle I Sit the Welsh? That is a true story. Someone asked me that.
That's 100% true. It's 100% true. I mean, I thought it was clever because I'm like, hey, I'm posing the question because people are like, is it the Welsh? And it's like, yeah, that's the handle. But I get, yes, I sit the Welsh, and always the classic, is it the Welch, like the purple drink? So it is. Is it the Welsh?
Is it the Welsh?
That's the first time I've heard the explanation of the handle. Actually,
yeah, it's not. I mean, it's really not that great.
Yeah, no, I yeah, okay. I'm glad I heard it. Yeah,
well, it's working.
And of course, make sure you check out the Welsh's work over at In This League, hosts their podcast there, and Prospect One, where he goes crazy deep on baseball prospects. Could also be heard on the Fantasy Black Book and on Sports Grid. Is there anything else you want to promote before we get started?
I hope not. I mean, at this point, it's a little extended there, but I mean, I think, the thing that people would care about the most here would be like the In This League Fantasy Baseball podcast, and probably more than anything to this conversation would be Prospect One, because that's where it's my full coverage. It's what's funny, and I try not to do it. I'm 100% like a name droppy guy, and I hate doing it, but in my soul, it has to come out. And it's like half the guys we're going to talk about in this episode today, I've talked to, I've been around, I've interviewed on my show. So it's I'm apt to do it. But if you check out the show, it's fantasy baseball driven for prospects. I live in Arizona, so I get to come out and be around these guys. When humans can be around humans, I do that. And I've been doing it for many years, and I get some of these dudes on my podcast, and Alec Boehm being one of them, and a whole bunch of others. So yeah, check it out. Prospect One, any podcast place.
Yeah, and that's not just like a humble brag or a weird flex or anything, because I've talked to the Welsh in the past, previous stops, some radio stuff, and he's just like, yeah, I'm out here in the back, he's like, just drops this prospect, and he's like, I just saw this prospect, hitting off a tee, and this guy throwing it, and I'm like, yeah.
Well, Stamps, if you remember the last thing you did, he actually, Frank had me do a call-in. I was on the Padres backfield. I remember this 100%.
That's what it was.
It might have been this past year, or maybe it was the year before. I'm on the Padres backfield. I'm watching Mackenzie Gore and Adrian Morion work line drills with Garrett Richards. And maybe it was Garrett Richards. And I'm just walking around the field to see Francisco Mejia over here, Chris Paddock over here. And I'm just walking on the backfields of the Padres, just doing my phone interview, just walking through people. I'm like, I'm out with Frankie Stamps. Get out of here. So, yeah, I have 100% done many interviews on the backfields. And I always say the good stuff for you.
Yeah. Welsh is like, I'm wasting my time talking to Frank here when I could be interviewing all these awesome prospects. All right, so we're going to ask the Welsh about some of these big names. Of course, we're going to talk about Mackenzie Gore a little bit later on in the show and ask who some of your favorite sleepers are towards the end. I've got a game of Guess Who, Prospect Edition. I don't know if this player is still a prospect, but you know what? He's still a prospect in my eyes, so I'm going to go with it.
I'm horrible at these games. Scott, I feel like you and I have done this before. I am horrific when it comes to these guessing games. You would think it would be my wheelhouse. They'd be like, podcast host, first name Scott, last name Bogman that you've hosted with. And I'm like, I don't know who it is. Like, I cannot put stuff together. Are you like that at all, Scotty?
No.
Okay. Well, I think you're going to win.
Good. Somebody has to be good at these games, I guess, or else we would stop doing them.
It's not me.
It would not be good to listen to.
I'm like a 3-1 underdog on this today for sure.
Honestly, I think the worse you guys are, the better it makes for content. So we'll find out a little bit later on. We do have some news that we'll get to right now. Marcus Stroman has accepted the qualifying offer and will remain with the New York Mets in 2021. It's actually quite hilarious that the other day we did our free agent invitational for the first time, where we predicted where players would go in the offseason, and I had Marcus Stroman pegged to go to the White Sox. And the very next day, Tony La Russa comes out that he is a buffoon and was arrested for a DUI, and Marcus Stroman then tweeted, I will never sign with the White Sox. So I got that one quite wrong, and Scott, you said that he was going to go to the Phillies. So we were both wrong. We're 0 for 1 to this point. Does it matter for his fantasy value that he's going back to the Mets?
I mean, we didn't get much of a look at him with the Mets since he didn't participate this year. The Mets are going to be a pretty good team. He's since he's a ground ball pitcher, I don't really think the venue affects him that much. No change really.
Alrighty, fair enough. I mean, he's better for points leagues. We know that. He's a high whip pitcher. He gives up a decent amount of hits. He doesn't strike out enough batters for the amount of hitters that he walks. So he'll give you some depth. I think he'll give you innings. Better for points leagues, in my opinion. According to MLB.com's John Morosi, the Mets, Yankees, Phillies, Blue Jays, and Cardinals are, quote, viewed as the strongest candidates to land Francisco Lindor from the Indians this offseason. And I said this the other day. I think it's probably about a 90% chance that Francisco Lindor is going to be traded. Welsh, prediction. Where do you think Lindor gets traded to this offseason?
Ooh, I mean, I think first thing I would point is I think it's 100% at this point with where the Indians have been. They've kind of been toying around with this for like a year and a half or so. So it's 100% going to happen. If I had to take a guess, I actually kind of think the Mets might be in play here. I'm not sure if it's an absolute need because, Andres Jimenez, who is a middle infield prospect who really had a phenomenal year last year. And I watched him for a couple years. He spent 2 years out here in the AFL out here in Arizona, and he's kind of changed as a prospect. He kind of took over in that middle infield spot, but you also had Rosario taper back, but they still got Cano in there as well. I think the universal DH, just piecing this all together, universal DH could give them the opportunity to maybe move Cano off of the infield. You could move Jimenez and Rosario and play second, and you go full throttle payroll to the Mets. And they've also got the prospects. They've got some of the guys. This is a rental But the Mets, can pay the money. This is kind of like a Dodgers situation. They can pay the money after now with Cohen. You got players tweeting about how Syndergaard put a tweet of a guy running through a brick wall because they want to play for this guy because he doesn't care about the money. They could use some more offense around an amazing pitching staff. I think the Mets are a no-brainer. I think it also would help a guy like Stroman get a big-time shortstop in there, help that middle infield defense a little bit. And, whether it's Ronnie Mauricio, who is kind of one of their top young prospects. They just kind of loaded up in the draft as well. They got a bunch of good young pitching prospects, and they've got a phenomenal catching prospect in Francisco Alvarez. They've got the assets that I think that would surprise people to make a move and be aggressive, and I think Cohen will do so, and I kind of think that's the play. I think Lindor to the Mets, that would be my easy favorite.
That's why I like the Welsh. I said the Mets the other day as well, and I think it's a match made in heaven. Look, the Mets can give some major league ready players. They can give up one of Jimenez or Ahmed Rosario and keep the other one and move that player to second base. They can give up a Brandon Nimmo if the Indians wanted an outfielder. They have some prospects they can give up as well. So I think that Lindor to the Mets makes a lot of sense as well. And I have a feeling we will find out sooner rather than later where he winds up. Shane Bieber won the AL Cy Young Award unanimously. His early ADP is 8.0, according to the NFBC. Not really any surprise. I think we're all kind of expecting Bieber to go in that late.
Was he going as the number one pitcher? I took part in the Too Early mocks, which our friend Justin Mason does. And in the draft I was in, I took the first pitcher, and I took Bieber over anybody. Shout out to Scott White, who has been a Bieber guy, had Bieber fever forever, and has been very, very right about him. I've had questions on Bieber in the past that he could really maintain the strikeout numbers, and it's clear that he's there. And I took him as the number one pitcher, and not everybody was a big fan of that. Still the DeGroms out there, the Garrett Coles, but in my eyes, it's Bieber, and then the next tier. Maybe DeGrom is in that tier, but I took Bieber. Yeah. I think it was at 7.
Yeah, and that's where you're in lockstep with Scott, because I believe, Scott, you have Bieber as your SP1 overall, according to this.
And I actually have him 5th overall, 5th among all players.
Okay.
DeGrom 6th, though I have them right there together.
Okay.
It's for me, the distinguishing factors, I guess, are how consistently Bieber goes 7 and sometimes beyond 7. He's kind of in his own category for that, even beyond DeGrom. And I think that has contributed to hampering DeGrom's win total 3 years in a row now, where the Mets just haven't given him near the wins he deserves. And wins, we don't like to put a lot of focus on them, but they are kind of the most important category for starting pitchers.
I love that you said that. You just made so many people so mad, and I love it because there's just so many warriors on there that are like, what we need to get rid of? We need to get rid of wins. And it's like, okay, we get it. But guess what? It is a main category in a 5x5. It is a predominant category. Wins are super, super important, and it is a factor for Bieber. I agree with you. Though if Lindor went to the Mets, it's one more step closer to maybe helping that offense. But again, I'm lockstep with you.
Yeah, theoretically. Theoretically, I would say that it's just a fluke for DeGrom. I mean, the Mets have been a pretty good team over the years. They've had other pitchers win a decent number of games, but 3 years in a row, I can't help but weigh that to some degree. When you're splitting hairs between Bieber and DeGrom, it factors in for me.
But I just throw out here, what about Lindor? It's interesting we're talking about this because Lindor would be coming off of the Indians, and that's a big force of their offense. You take that away. We don't know what the replacement might be, or Ahmed Rosario, or there's actually a guy we'll probably talk about later that I really like with the Indians. But if they go into some type of a move-off mode, if Carlos Carrasco was in it, they're in a semi-sell-off mode. That might be a little bit of a negative in a wins category for Bieber and give an advantage to DeGrom directly if it was that move. If it was Indian Mets, it could flip it.
That would be interesting if Lindor switching from Bieber's team to DeGrom's team was enough to split the two in my rank. I'd have to think about it. I mean, I think it actually close enough. Yeah.
And I have DeGrom as my SP1 just because he's done it for longer, and the wins thing is just so fluky. And I've cited this before. The Mets just had the third best OPS as a team this past season. Like, they have a really good offense. It's just very odd that DeGrom hasn't been able to get wins. And I agree with you, Welsh. Enough of this, like, let's get rid of the win. It's a cop-out for fantasy. When people find things that are hard with the game, they say, oh, let's get rid of wins. Let's get rid of saves. Let's play saves plus holds. Or in fantasy football, let's get rid of tight ends because the position stinks. I mean, that's what makes fantasy fun, right? Like, if everything was so easy, what's the point of everything that we're doing, right?
Like, you can have the argument. Like, listen, quality starts, is it better than wins? Sure. It's more predictive, and it pays off a little bit more, and it pays off your high-end pitching. I think the argument is so tied to Roto, and I know you guys probably play a lot more Roto. I've played a ton more Roto over the last couple of years, but I'm naturally a head-to-head person, and I feel like that's always been a really, really big Roto argument. And it doesn't take away that, like, is quality starts better than wins? Maybe, but guess what? Wins is a predominant stat. It is still a stat we're out there. So are saves. Just the constant barrage of, like, we got to get rid of it. We got to get rid of it. Okay, I get it. Guess what? It's not. And it is something we have to factor in when we're doing our ranks, when we're drafting, when we're doing trades. It's something we got to deal with.
All right, let's wrap up the news so we can actually get to some prospect stuff. Trevor Bauer won the National League Cy Young. Just a reminder that I suck because he was my biggest bust coming into the season. So, boom, take that L. Michael Lorenzen, speaking of Bauer's maybe former team. Sounds like he's not going to go back to the Reds. Michael Lorenzen says that he will report to 2021 spring training in the Reds rotation as a starter in 2020. He pitched 9 2/3 innings.
He looked good at the end of the year. There's a couple starts he made.
9 2/3 with 14 strikeouts. He allowed 3 runs. So just a little news item that'll slip in there for you. All right, Welsh. Some general prospect questions that we have. What's going to happen?
Oh, well, guys, thanks so much, because I have the answer. I've got all the answers. What's going to happen to what? Will there be minor leagues? Will minor leaguers ever play in games? That's a loaded question.
It is a loaded question. I have no idea. But specifically when it comes to evaluating prospects for 2021, and I think obviously I'm sure you're already dealing with this. We're all going to deal with this from a fantasy perspective for dynasty, for redraft, trying to figure out, how aggressive are these teams going to be with their prospects who just lost out on basically an entire year of development. So it is an all-encompassing question, but basically, what are you going to do with evaluation for 2021, given the fact that we just missed out on a whole season of development?
Yeah, this has been I really should go back and do a bunch of my podcasts and just piece all the interviews together, because this is something I kind of drug out for months and months, especially when, we were in deep quarantine, because this was kind of the biggest question. The season's taken away. A lot of what I do has been built around development. I'm here for half of Major League Baseball's developmental leagues, and this is what, I've kind of grown accustomed to. I would say the biggest confirmation I probably got, because I've talked with Jim Callis and Jonathan Mayo, but Eric Longenhagen with Fangraphs is one of the best in the industry, and he's become a friend out here. And I asked him the same question, and I had posed in my mind that at the end of the day, I don't know if there's that much developmental hit that's taken away from these guys as we all think, because you think of minor league being taken away and we all just go, okay, well, everybody's back a year. Let's trade off the super young prospects because we've lost a year. There's a lot of hands-off stuff that's done on the lower levels. So if you take I'll try to make this quick, but if you take the international guys that come out, there's a lot of exciting, Wander Franco you talk about was an international guy just a couple years ago. Those guys didn't really lose a whole lot. They've been out here, they trained, and they're just going to move forward. So I don't take them. The AAA guys, it's really not. If anything, they might have got a boost because they went to these alt sites. They worked against high-end pitching. They were working up against essentially major leaguers at that point. So whether you were, let's say, a AA player, you got a lot of work. Jared Kelnick is a perfect example of that. The guys I'm most worried about were the transitional players from A-ball to advanced A, which is kind of the biggest boost. And that doesn't really affect anybody for 2021 as far as your redrafts go. I think it could stall them out. Examples are, if you're a dynasty player, Christian Robinson with Arizona Diamondbacks is very, very exciting. That's a guy. And he also changed his body. There's players that are changing their bodies. This is a guy that he dropped 20 pounds before the season started. And then he came back 3 months later to the alt site and had gained 20 more pounds of muscle. This is a guy who's completely transformed his body 3 times in the span of a year. Those are the guys that I'm most worried about from a developmental standpoint. So from a dynasty owner, if immediacy is the most important thing to you, I'd be moving off of some of those players because I think they're going to be halted back. And then, the last part is I do think there's certain cases across the board. There's actually a prospect that has not reached a very high level at all that I think will reach the majors next year. But then there are some guys that, like Drew Waters specifically, Drew Waters with the Atlanta Braves. I think this guy he lost a year of development. He was at alt sites. He's blocked, and he doesn't have numbers to back up pushing anybody else off. That I think those type of like high advanced A players are the ones that maybe lose a year or don't get you for this upcoming season when you get super excited about some of those players. So it's kind of an answer. I think it's low amount of development that's been taken away. Some guys, and I'll finally end this, some guys probably are going to have gotten 2 years of advancement by being at the alt sites than in minor leagues. Example, another Diamondback, Corbin Carroll, who's a really talented player that dynasty owners should have. Corbin Carroll, instead of when he went from the AZL to low A, instead of going and playing against high A and starting to see the first time where, you're getting some off-speed stuff, this guy went up, it was, hitting against major league Diamondbacks pitchers, John Duplantier, AAA prospect pitchers. And he has even been quoted in some interviews saying, listen, I learned more than I could have possibly ever learned, or I learned in my first stint in professional baseball because I was with all my coaches, all the trainers, all the best prospects, and it's another level of development. So I think it's a little bit overblown than we all really think it is. And I think there's chances for people to take advantage of that in dynasty leagues.
First of all, I like that you used the two examples you used were Diamondbacks.
Of course.
Yeah. What do you live in?
I've got like quotes and I've got some personal experience, and those were apt for me to use, but it is very Homerish.
I was gonna say, do you live in Arizona or something?
What's that?
Do you live in Arizona or something?
I live in Arizona.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Diamondbacks hat right there.
When I'm looking at this, and this is the part of the offseason where I really do my deep dive on prospects normally. The problem I'm facing is what am I deep diving? Because that's when we talk about evaluating prospects, normally we have a bunch of data to work with, and the data is stalled. Like we didn't get any new data in 2020, except for the guys the prospects still considered prospects who came up and played in the majors. So like, I know you do a top 500, Chris, which I mean, just blows my mind because, the amount of time I spend just on a top 100, and you do a top 500. I don't even know how you tell the difference between number 320 and 460, but I know you do a top 500. So what is it mostly the same from last year? I mean, what new information do you have?
So it's a great question, and you're not wrong necessarily about that. I'd also say, like, people get very, and you guys know this, people get very worked up with numbers, so it's like, it's one thing when it's like, hey, listen, you have this guy at 30 and everybody else has him at 10, but people will look and be like, hey, you've got this guy at 350 and he's 250 and somewhere else. When you start to get past like the top 200 in prospects, the length of value is the margins are much smaller. Just because a guy is 250 and another guy is 350, it doesn't actually mean that they're that much further apart. There might be just certain intangibles. So, what do you pull from this year? You're right, Scott. No, you're right. There are a lot of the things that are the same. And I have cautioned a lot of people on my own show that I think this is a very important year. And this is a testament to you too, especially because I know, people lock into you a lot for, the coming years realm of prospects, that I have been championing that you really have to find the people that you trust. And it might not be me. It might be somebody else. It might only be Scott. It might not be either one of us, but you have to find those people because you're going to see people changing lists. And it's like, how did you do that? Oh, you got your sources? You got all those sources? I think it's very difficult to make massive changes. And I am a little bit more conservative. I think if people have seen my ranks before, I am usually the first on international because I do a lot more studying on the international side and I see them here in Arizona. So I'll be more aggressive on international, which gets people, but also I don't like to make drastic moves when someone does something right off the cuff because this is a developmental process. And, how can I go and pull all these other players and add them to the list and can they change? There are definitely changes. There are guys that played this year that made some big movement. There is information you get out at alt sites. There's also just some directives as far as like players that I've seen. And if I knew this guy was over at an alt camp working with major leaguers, I might give them an extra little boost. And there's a lot of information on instructional leagues. So it is, mine is like it's a living list. I never stop it. It's always available. I have a Patreon for it. You can see it every single month as I go through the process and update on it. But I mean, if I was sitting there and like every 6 months updating a 500, it would be wild. But that is a big question, man. It's like, how do you value these players in a year that was lost? And I think it can still be done, but you might have to be more critical than you've ever been before. You can buy values on super young players. And I think the guys that are closer hold the most value in Dynasty than they've ever done before. So there is an advantage, with however you view your own team.
All right, so let's talk about some specific players. And of course, I led the show with Wander Franco. And let me just ask you about him first and foremost. He is by far and away the top prospect. I don't think it changes on anyone's list. I think it's just Franco across the board. And I mean, look, the guy's ridiculous. He's going to turn just 20 years old in March. And in 2019, between single A and high A ball, he had 327 with 9 homers and 18 steals. The plate discipline is absolutely ridiculous. In his minor league career, he has 83 walks to 54 strikeouts. I mean, that is just ridiculous. And I don't want to make too many comps because comps get a little wonky and stuff, but like I get Juan Soto vibes from Wander Franco. So you tell me if I'm crazy, Welsh. Do you expect him in 2021? If we're in redraft drafts, is he worth taking? When do you expect him? It seemed like he was kind of close. He had like the World Series jersey, and there was like some rumors he might get called up then. All encompassing. What do you think happens next year with Wander Franco?
Yeah, I mean, first off, he's just one of the most polished, if maybe not the most polished prospects in baseball as far as a hitter. I remember a couple years ago, when it was a MLB pipeline, they had given an 80 comp on the hit tool for Vlad, and they had just like never done it. And I actually happened to have Jim Callis on like right as it happened, and we kind of talked thoroughly through that. And I think even at that time, he had said, listen, Wander Franco is a guy that we might be doing this in a couple years. And I remember when Franco was an international prospect, 16 years old. And the one thing that stood out to me, and this is someone I comped him to when I first saw him, this was way before he was even tied with the Rays, was he looked like Hanley Ramirez to me in the way he swung. And he bulked up, physically bulked up. He's got probably the best eye it's reminiscent of Vladimir Guerrero, except he's got some other intangibles as far as athleticism goes, and he can loft the ball and he can run. I mean, that's what kind of differentiates him. And even as much as a year and a half ago, if you would have pinned people down, people would have still taken Franco over Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And just as far as a hit tool, I mean, obviously Vlad isn't a stolen base option, but there's a lot of discussions made about would Wander Franco in a normal season in this last Arizona Fall League in 2019, would he be there in 2020? And I kind of thought it was a possibility. I think the team was moving him. And then, for him to get the ride through the playoffs, I think it's there. The problem is a couple things. Is the Rays have already gone out and said they don't want to push him. So they're already starting that narrative. And they do have guys. Joey Wendell had a pretty good season. If you actually take a look at his numbers, I was just working on my redraft ranks and I was like, God, I can't ignore Joey Wendell and what he did last year. And they've got versatility across the board. But I think there's a possibility that he could play some third. And I think, the Rays they like to slow play it. But I think there's a manipulation that is going to take place that Wander will be. I think it's a half season, and that's what I'd be banking on. And if you play in deeper leagues or you can stash properly, I am going to rank him, and I'm going to rank him aggressively in that respect, that I'm going to get about a half season out of him. I'm not sure it'll be much different than Jared Kelenic, and I'll bet you Jared Kelenic will probably go higher in some early redrafts thinking that he could break camp. But I would assume like a half a season, and I think he's going to be a stud.
So we just did our first Roto mock for 2021, obviously redraft Roto mock, and Jared Kelenic, is that how you say it? The Mariners.
Yeah, Jared Kelenic.
It looks like Kelenic, but it's Kelenic.
Yeah,
Kelenic. He went in round 15, and Wander Franco went in round 16. So very
close. Okay,
But
good.
Kelenic
right.
a little ahead, and yeah, I think if we're talking half season, and I wouldn't expect more than that from Wander Franco myself. Probably not somebody that's going to that anybody's going to talk about in the single digit rounds. I'm actually interested in what you think of another Rays prospect, still technically a prospect, even though he's kind of a household name at this point, and that's Randy Arozarena. I was pretty hesitant to buy into him. His minor league numbers are pretty good, but he never got much hype as a prospect. His minor league numbers were good enough that you could say, okay, so maybe the evaluators are a little low on this guy, but they were projecting him as more of a fourth outfielder type.
Absolutely.
And as good as he was in the minors, it wasn't with a ton of power. I'm kind of past that now. I in redraft, I have him outside my top 30 outfielders, so I'm not going crazy over him, but like he ended up with 17 home runs between the regular season and playoffs. And once you get up to a number that high, I could see maybe 10, 11 home runs. Okay, he just got hot, but 17, like that's usually you get to that kind of number, and it's kind of validating.
I 100% agree with you. I mean, I wish I keep some stats on my ranks list, and I wish I kept a chart that, because there was a time in about 2018 where I was pretty high on Arozarena because he was a Cardinals prospect. And it was just because it was always a good hit tool. There wasn't power, but if you're evaluating prospects, if a guy presents you with a really good hit tool, and then you could see some muscle being built on the body, power is going to come last. So he's running, he's hitting. That was kind of exciting. But then he just, he never got the push. He kept kind of falling back, and he up. And then this year, he's traded, he's the throw-in in a trade, and he's a completely transformed guy. So I'm with you. I always liked the hit tool. I like that he could run, but I never thought he was going to be a big impact player. And, I think Eno Saris had marked some of it, and when he was going through his run, that one of the biggest changes that you saw in Randy Arozarena that I think you can't ignore is the EV changes. It was like a 3 to 4 boost, which was showing some of that built muscle. Famously, we joke now about, what was it, the chicken and rice that he was working through. It was just push-ups, pull-ups, chicken and rice, building body muscle. He's always had the hit tool. So you talk about the muscle coming up. You talk about this beautiful swing. You look at the results, but then you also look at the results, not just like in the season, because I'm with you. Like, you could take a month of anybody and fall in love, but he also did it in the biggest, most clutch point that you possibly could do it across the entire playoffs, breaking records. And I think that says something for it. I think this guy, he's got that clutch. There is power, there's speed. He's a 5-tool guy. I got to be all in. And it's hard for me because I think the most difficult thing I have with prospects are the late bloomers. It is the most difficult. There's a guy that just teeters, and then right at the end just comes up or needs a year. Those are my most difficult evaluation because I've got this track record built in my brain of who they are, and I don't want to buy into it. This guy has made the changes that you can't ignore, and I'm going to be pretty aggressive on him this year. But it also is an amazing time to sell high on him in Dynasty. You cannot ignore what that sell high could look like, and I would consider that.
Yeah, and you should consider it when his early NFBC ADP, I think there's been 5 drafts completed in the NFBC, so it is very early, and this data is interesting to say the least. His early ADP is 54.4.
Yeah,
he is a 5th round pick, and his steamer projections, which you can find on Fangraphs, are a 258 batting average, 25 home runs, and 21 steals. So, yeah. I mean, if he comes anywhere close to that, then he might be worth a mid-round pick.
Yeah,
but
he might, but like he didn't, and he can run. He just didn't run much during. And maybe he was hitting too many home runs to run. But he stole 4 bases during the regular season. He stole 1 during the playoffs. So he's 5 for 7. It looks like. I think that's not nothing. That's not nothing. But projecting him for more than 20 steals, I think, is a little aggressive. He went in that mock draft we did tonight. He went 115 as opposed to the ADP of 54. 115 is about where I have him. Are you saying? I think your reaction there leads me to believe you think it's too low, Chris.
Yeah, that's low. I mean, between the mocks I have done, we're conducting some in this league as well to actually create an early ADP that's not based off of NFBC. I think NFBC is fantastic, but it kind of loses the consumer a little bit because it's a little bit more high stakes. Mm-hmm. I think I'd split that. I like him in the 70s. I mean, to be frank, I'm really curious here. I'm going to try to put you guys on the spot to look at it, but I'd be curious where like a guy like Teoscar Hernandez went, because there's another one of those guys. I'm all about Teoscar Hernandez, and if I was getting a discount comparatively from Arozarena to Hernandez, I would take Hernandez, because I actually think I'd love that to be a debate and a look back, because I think Hernandez could outperform Arozarena this season. And if there was a 20 to 30 round or pick difference, I mean, give it to me all day. But it might not be the case, because Arozarena has been doing it for a little bit longer.
Hernandez went 8 picks later.
Okay, so I get nothing out of that.
Yeah.
I don't think
that's interesting that you like Hernandez that much, because he's another one who I have a hard time buying into. He hit the ball very hard for 2 months, harder than we've ever seen him hit it before. Plate discipline was horrible. Horrible. The strikeout rate especially was just man, you better keep hitting it that hard. And I don't have exit velocity over a 2-month period is not something I'd put a lot of stock in, I guess.
But I think Arozarena is going to suffer from some of that as well. You're going to see a complete pitch change in how pitchers are going to approach him, especially over elongated season. You're not going to see as much fastball. There's a little bit more of a story. It happens to all these guys. There's, again, a prospect we may talk about that I was disappointed they showed no plate discipline whatsoever, and pitchers didn't need to adjust to it. Guys like Arozarena, there's going to be an adjustment period, and he's going to have a downfall at some point next season. It's just how long. And I think he's talented enough to get through it. That's how I also feel about Teoscar Hernandez. He's one of those guys. We can always look at the volatility of strikeouts and stuff. People did it to Fernando Tatis Jr. to weigh him down on how valuable he can't be because of his strikeout numbers. But at the end of the day, talent pulls through. And I think Hernandez is like a 5-tool guy in a super, super upcoming lineup that he's going to be hitting between guys like Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., and whatever else they end up doing. So if I was getting more of a discount, that would be a little bit more exciting. I'd be fun to track that. But if those guys are going next to each other, I don't know. I'll take either one and I'll be happy, but maybe not at 50.
All right, we're going to hit a quick break. Just want to remind everybody that the 2020 Masters is finally here. The First Cut has all your golf needs as Tiger Woods begins his green jacket defense this week at Augusta National. Tune into the First Cut Golf Podcast, part of the CBS Sports Podcast Network, all week long for tournament previews, picks, and best bets, plus round-by-round recaps as the world's best tee off this Thursday. Actually, when you're listening to it, that would be today. The First Cut crew is on the scene at Augusta National, ready to bring you every insight into a tradition like any other. Go listen to the First Cut Golf Podcast wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll do a little bit of rapid fire with some more prospects here with the Welsh. Poor Joe Adell. What are we going to do with this man in 2021? He had a dreadful 2020 campaign. Probably was not ready for the major leagues. He hit just 161 with 55 strikeouts in 38 games, but we know better than to judge prospects on a 38-game sample. Just look at his teammate Mike Trout. His first 40 games did not fare very well. He had a sub-700 OPS in his rookie season back in 2011. Welsh, what do you think about Joe Adell? I mean, are there too many warning signs here? Do you think he starts 2021 in the minors again if there is a minor league season? What are you thinking with Joe Adell?
Yeah, I'm a big Joe Adell fan. He culminated the end of my Arizona Fall League in 2019 with an interview. We did about 20 minutes. He's just a great guy. He's a phenomenal athlete, and I'm very worried about what the season was. His plate discipline was the most concerning thing, but I'm gonna stick with it. I think he is one of the more talented outfielders and just overall prospects I've seen in a long time. Hard hit. He can run. He doesn't utilize it enough. He was very candid about his power when I spoke to him as well. Doesn't give me cookie cut answers. And he improves. He consistently improves. And I think he will be in the majors next year. And I've never seen a prospect in a long time look as fooled as he had. So I think you have to be very concerned about it, especially with those strikeout numbers. But he has the intangibles to be a very, very valuable prospect. I don't mean to comp him to it, but it could be a similar path to like Byron Buxton. Speed, power, overall athleticism. I hope it doesn't take as long, but I'm still a buyer of Adell.
Joe Adell's early ADP in NFBC is 264, so you could have yourself a bit of a post-hype prospect situation here. It's so weird to say post-hype, like he played 38 games. Just real quickly, would you buy low in Dynasty if you can?
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And there are people that have dropped Adell down to like 30 and 40 on their prospect list. I've still got him inside the top 10. It's not enough. And there's, we can just always talk about Trout as a perfect example of it. Joe Adell's a guy that I'm not willing to bet against. From everything I've been around him and seen him in the minors, so one of his first professional games, I would not bet against this guy right now. So it looked really ugly, like super, super ugly. but I'm not done. And I would absolutely buy low in every last pick in a redraft. And I would definitely pick him up in Dynasty if it's cheap.
Where are we with Mackenzie Gore? Consensus top pitching prospect. I think a lot of people were hoping to see, maybe even expecting to see him, given what the Padres did last year. And, Luis Patino, who's actually younger, he passed him in the pecking order, it looks like, got the call before Mackenzie Gore did. Is the stock holding there? Is there any reason for concern?
No, I think the only thing I'm concerned about is that they just didn't give him an opportunity. They really kept, they went to everybody else they possibly could. Morion, they brought up, I think it was Cal Quantrill and Luis Patino, obviously, in the bullpen. I'm not 100% sure what that was all about. I've been around, again, this is the name droppy thing, but like Mackenzie Gore was like day one in Padres camp. I've seen him. He's intense. He's got an insane fastball. His third professional start. Nick Ahmed was rehabbing in one of the games, and I've never seen a professional look so silly. He just had Nick Ahmed just spinning around like a cartoon on his curveball, but he's just been a little bit inconsistent, and I think they're trying to hone in that consistency. And I kind of think Patino could have gone either way for them, is why they allowed him to go to the bullpen. I don't think that's an option for Mackenzie Gore. So I'm a little concerned why there was nothing there whatsoever. And even in the playoffs, they didn't go to it. So I think there's a little bit of cause of concern, but he's still my number one pitching prospect. We just need a tiny bit more consistency, but he's got 4+ pitches. He's insane.
Do you think we see him in 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely do. And I don't know how early the Padres can do it. They've done it with Paddock. I think that is actually a real possibility, depending what happens in free agency or, lack of free agency and trades. And that's another thing. I don't want to go on a tangent about it, but I think in 2021, there's a possibility, even though we lost a minor league season, we might see more prospects by the amount of teams that don't want to spend money in free agency and want to internally play their guys, because all ownership is worried about all the money they're losing. You saw guys take qualifying offers that seemed like a little bit of a shock. I think teams are going to be really, really wonky about how they spend their money. And I think the guys that can help now are the ones that are going to get the opportunity. So you could have guys that, I say Wander Franco, we might get him up even sooner. The Rays specifically are not the team to do that, but there's a lot of other teams that may curtail not spending, $8 million on some blah outfielder, and they may just go to their prospects to save the money.
Yeah, and it could make sense, especially with the Padres, given the late season injuries to Clevenger and Dinelson Lamet as well. So we'll see what happens with that in the offseason. Welsh, I'm going to hit you with a twofer here. Seattle Mariners, double dosage. And
faves.
Kalenic, you brought up the name a little bit earlier. And look, just had a 2020 season. I think a lot of people are excited about him, rightfully so. There's video surfacing of him on the internet hitting line drives off of Frisbees, and the hit tool looks like it's there. And he's got a power speed combination. And his teammate, a teammate at some point, Julio Rodriguez, who some people actually think has a higher upside than Kalenic. So do we see either, both in 2021? What's your outlook for both these guys?
I am one of those guys that I have Julio Rodriguez above Kelenic, and say it again, going to drop it again. These both guys have been around for a long time. If you want to hear how intense Jared is, I did an interview with him, and he talks about his goals, and he's just very goal oriented, and he's just really into, it was coming out of the 2019 season. He's like, I wanted to go 2020 in the minor leagues. We set that goal. I want to make the majors in 2020. This was for 19. He had told me in the 2019 Fall League, he's like, I want to make the majors. That is the major goal here. He's really been into working out, so he's been building a lot of muscle. You saw that in the alt campsite. Kelenic is the guy for 2021. I would not be shocked if he broke camp. I don't think it'll happen. I think teams are going to want to manipulate as much as they possibly can, especially when you have depth, which the Mariners actually do have some depth. But I do think he's going to get some run next year, and I think he's going to be pretty strong. He was one of the best high school bats coming out when he originally did, and he's built into power. He can run. He's intense. He's going to be the face of the organization, but so is Julio Rodriguez. And Julio Rodriguez is one of my absolute favorite people. And that guy, he was just in Instructs not too long ago after he returned from his wrist injury. He was dropping 111, 112 EVs and Instructs. He hits the ball really hard. He's still got some stuff to work on. He's still chasing a little bit, and he can get fooled a little bit down below, and he's not going to be much of a runner, but he's going to be a massive impact back. We're talking a bat like 35, 40 homers, 100. I think he can hit 300. I wouldn't be shocked if he struggles a little bit early on because he's still very young and he's getting pressed. I don't think, and this is something me and James Anderson from RotoWire disagree with, we go about this a lot. I don't think even after this lost season, he thought Julio could have been a 2020 guy. I don't think Julio's going to be a 2021 guy, but I do think Kelenic will be that. And by the way, those two guys are like best friends. I think they were roommates for a little bit. I talked to Kelenic about that. They love each other. They are going to grow up and be superstars in the same organization. They're going to be the new Bash brothers when they get there, as far as prospects and Mariner fans and everybody. Julio Rodriguez is going to be one of those guys that he just transcends all teams and people will love him. My bet is on him long-term, but that is not a discount to Kelenic. They're both going to be studs, but in 2021, go with Jared Kelenic.
And of course, the Mariners, nobody's expecting them to compete next year, so they have even more incentive to keep Rodriguez down. A team that was surprisingly aggressive in promoting its prospects this year, though, even though, the Tigers, they weren't contenders. And yet we saw Casey Mize come up. We saw Tarek Skubal come up. The one we didn't see come up was Matt Manning. He's the one I'm invested in Dynasty. I actually traded Joey Bart for him straight up in a league.
That's a good trade.
It's a surprisingly straightforward trade for a Dynasty league, high-end prospect for high-end prospect.
And spending on a pitching prospect. That's always something that's a little bit dicey investing.
Yes. There's no such thing as a pitching prospect, right? Except I am all about pitching right now in fantasy baseball and just want as much of it as I could possibly can, in part because I know I can't count on everybody. But anyway, what do you think of Matt Manning and his chances?
Yeah, he probably has the highest upside of all those guys. They're so deep too, by the way, just across the board. The Tigers are so exciting with what they did in this past draft, but I was never the biggest Casey Mize guy on the planet. And I think you saw some of the worries, in the minors. The strikeout numbers didn't get too crazy. And you saw early on, no one could hit that splitter and it looks insane. But then when people realize you don't have to swing at that splitter, and if he doesn't command the other pitches, he's very hittable, and you can take advantage of him, because then he's going to start backtracking. Then he has to go to the fastball, and people can get up to that. Same thing happened with Tarek Skubal, because when his secondary stuff wasn't working and he couldn't get that to command, he was way more hittable, way more down to life. Where Matt Manning, I think, is a big, giant, projectable, high fastball strikeout pitcher. He's got 3 offerings. I don't think he's weighted like the other two as much, where if this one offering doesn't work, he's kind of backtracking a little bit, and they're babying him. You can tell how important he is to the organization. They didn't push him up where they did with Skubal. Kind of had the same like Luis Patino thing, where he could go either way and he could just compete in short innings, but they don't want to damage. And he did get damaged a little bit with this injury, but he should be healthy next year. Big strikeout option. He is a very, very good bet, and I would take him over Mize and Tarek Skubal.
In Dynasty as well? So if you can say you could flip Mize for Manning, you would do that?
Yeah, I actually in a league, an industry league I'm doing, I had Casey Mize. I had drafted him, and I don't like drafting pitching. And I passed up Joey Bart, actually, ironically, to take Casey Mize because I also knew that there was value in pitching. And I ended up trading Casey Mize for Alex Kirilloff, who's one of my absolute favorite prospects. And it felt a little dicey because then Mize came right back up, but I feel great about it right now because I think Alex Kirilloff has huge, huge upside. And Casey Mize was exposed a little bit. But yeah, I would go with Manning. The only difference is, you get production right now from Casey Mize, and he's not a scrub. If he gets those secondary offerings going with the splitter, he's going to be pretty scary. I just don't know if he'll be like a 10K per 9 type of guy like I think Manning can be.
Welsh, Andrew Vaughn was the 3rd overall pick by the White Sox in the 2019 draft. And I think obviously they drafted him a little bit older, 3-year player in college. He'll turn 23 years old in April. I think the hope was that he would join the major league team sooner rather than later. But he's one of these weird situations where he misses out on this season of development. Great plate discipline, has a great eye. He can walk. He doesn't strike out much. He hits a ton of line drives. I think he's a very projectable hitter, but because he hasn't played above high A, can we expect him in 2021? It seems like if they don't do anything else in the offseason, we'll see what happens. They declined Edwin Encarnacion's option, and it seems like Vaughn can kind of fit in there as the first base or the DH at some point next season. Is that something you would expect?
Yeah, I would tell you something I need to really reevaluate for my 2021 ranks as I'm working on them. Vaughn might be the most gettable player for 2021 to draft early on, because another thing that they did was he worked on third base at the alt camps. It was something that kind of broke, that he was going to start working for some third base for flexibility. He never got out there, but people forget Andrew Vaughn was maybe one of the best pure hitters in the last couple of years that's come out of a draft. And, Andrew Vaughn and Spencer Torkelson have been, pitted up against each other, both as Pac-12 first basemen for a long time. And if you ask a lot of evaluators over the last 2 years, Andrew Vaughn would take the win. Better hit tool, not as much power as Torkelson. Torkelson can get beat a little bit low, where Andrew Vaughn would not. So there's a lot of people that would, I don't know if they do it today, but they would have taken Vaughn over Torkelson. I think that sounds crazy for a lot of people. He's ready. Played at Cal. He played at the highest level. One of the best hitters. He's multi-position eligible right now. I've seen him a couple times. I'm not in absolute love with him, but he is an absolute major league player now. And I just throw out this little caveat. I don't know how easy it's going to be for the White Sox to bring in free agents across the board. And they're going to have some spots available. Right now, Andrew Vaughn, E5 was essentially drafted as a stop holder for Andrew Vaughn, and now he's gone. I think Andrew Vaughn could break camp as a DH, and he would provide them with first and third base eligibility. I just don't know if they're going to find a bunch of other great options unless Arusso wants a veteran. So I would bet on Andrew Vaughn next year, and just watch out. That bat's for real.
So you mentioned Torkelson. Let's transition right to him. The White Sox are contenders. The Tigers likely not. Torkelson hasn't gotten any minor league time yet, but he's supposed to be a pretty advanced hitter. Do you think we see him, not right away, but at some point in 2021?
My gut says yes. He surprised everybody by being drafted as a third baseman. And I saw one of his last games at ASU. It was really fun to finally get to see him in person on a super cold night in Arizona before everything kind of shut down. And his power is insane. It's one of the most ridiculous power grades I've ever seen on a prospect just in person, especially at the college level. Super smart, great defender. Doesn't get fooled as much as like I had been told. And I think he's one of the most exciting prospects. I've got him as a top 6 prospect overall in my ranks. And the third base thing is the caveat that could keep him out because he's working at a brand new position. But I think there's a real possibility later on we do see him. There's a flood coming. There's a flood coming of Detroit Tigers prospects that I don't know if it's going to happen in 2021. It might be 2022. And I think they could bring Riley Green and Torkelson up pretty close to each other. So if I had to bet and it was Torque, I would say, maybe it's like August or something like that. So I wouldn't be drafting him, but he is going to, with whatever minor league season we do actually get next season, whatever capacity it looks like, Torkelson is you're going to be trying to fight like why you don't have him at number 1. I think that's where he's at.
I don't know if they're really going to stick with the third base thing anyway, because they just called up Isaac Paredes last season, who maybe he doesn't stick as a starter, but I would think they'd want to at least give him a shot there. And
by the way, it's Isak. It's Isak Paredes.
Isak
wow. Paredes. That's a little breaking some news here. Isak Paredes.
I have never heard that pronunciation before, but I guess it makes sense. Okay, so yeah, I kind of think Torkelson's going to end up at first base, and maybe
that's like a Candelario. And Candelario can play third base. They've got flexibility. I think this is probably like Pujols. People forget like Pujols played some third base. I think in his rookie season, maybe the first 2, even a little bit of outfield. It's just about getting these bats in. There are guys that Wander Franco may play third. You may get Torkelson playing a little bit of third as well. Ultimately, this is a Gold Glove first baseman with 40 plus like homer potential. So yeah, it's the future's bright, and Torkelson one of the best.
All right. So if anyone's looking to bandwagon a team before it actually happens, you want to hop on a little bit early. It sounds like the Mariners and the Tigers are probably the teams to do it with, Welsh. So they have
agreed. Yeah, totally agree. And they got others. Both teams have had really, really good drafts and international classes for the Mariners for sure.
All right, let's play a quick game of guess who. I don't know if this player still has his prospect status or whatever. He'll always be a prospect in my mind until he either goes away or he actually is given a fair shake. Are you ready?
It's going to be a non-prospect, and so we're going to have our minds on prospects.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Before you said anything, I was going to say Lastings Millage, but then I was like, oh, he's still around. So okay. So this is a guy that didn't get his fair shake. I'm trying to figure it out, but okay.
Is Lastings Millage playing in like some random country like Manny Ramirez and they're like teammates somewhere? And
I hope so. I would love to get just like a random Twitter video of Lasting Millage just dropping something like 425. That would be awesome.
Very nice. All right. Number 1. I'm a former first-round pick in 2016. I don't know if Welsh has all the first-round picks memorized.
Brady Aiken?
No. Okay. And you can just...
the years and where they were drafted, that's not going to be a big key to me, but keep going.
Okay, and you can just shout out answers whenever you think you got it. I am batting .305 with 48 home runs and 52 steals over 396 career minor league games. So again, that's 305, 48 home runs, 52 steals. 396 minor league games.
Former first rounder.
Sounds like he's doing pretty well.
Those aren't bad numbers.
I saw 69 plate appearances in the majors in 2020. Yes, very nice. And I had just a 596 OPS. Sub 600 OPS in 69 plate appearances in the majors in 2020.
This is this one is bothering me. I feel like I have
big game earlier. You think you got it?
No, I don't. Like, I feel like I can, because the stolen bases are a big marker here for a prospect that's gotten a little bit of run with that power, but it's just not clicking. Keep going.
My early NFBC ADP, I don't know if this helps anyone.
Okay.
Is 183.6.
So he's being drafted.
So he does have some redraft appeal.
Is it Dylan Carlson?
It is not. That's not a bad guess, though.
Yeah, he has more home.
This is my last guess, so
yeah, this one. I'm gonna be pissed when you tell me the name, because I'm gonna be like, of course.
If I ever get consistent playing time, you would consider me lucky.
No, this is you did a name. Why can't I?
Hang on.
Former first round pick.
What? I told you I'm horrible at this, Scott. You're supposed to do this. You should have saved me 2 guesses ago.
I know.
Luck is in his name.
He debuted this year.
He didn't debut this year. He debuted in 2019.
Oh,
but he played this year.
All right, and he got 69 at bats this year.
396 minor league games, 305 batting average, 48 homers, 52 steals.
It's gonna be infuriating when you say this name. It will be infuriating when you say it.
I'll give you an off the cuff clue.
Okay.
I have lefty righty splits. I have issues with splits.
Okay, thanks for that.
If I ever get consistent playing time, you might consider me lucky.
We might be the 2 dumbest people. You know, Scott, do you realize how many people are screaming at us right now?
I don't think they are.
Mad.
I think they are genuinely
mad.
difficult.
No, but Frank's doing the name thing. Like, it should be so clear to us, and it's not clicking with me whatsoever.
Well, I don't even know what that means. Lucky, like.
Yeah, I'm thinking
through I'm thinking through the Lucky Charms, right?
Is this a Babbitt
whose last
thing?
name is Moon, or like Clover? I don't know.
Is this a Babbitt thing? What's his first name?
What division does he play? And that helps a lot of times.
The National League West.
Okay.
Oh, Edwin Rios?
No,
he doesn't steal bases. See,
Sam Hilliard?
No.
He's got
Sam Hilliard was a great guess.
His first name rhymes with Blavin.
What? This is the worst game. Why'd you do this, Frank?
What?
Who is
His first
it?
name rhymes with what?
Blavin, which is not a word. I'm trying to think of an actual word that this rhymes with.
Now they're yelling at us.
All right. All right. It is. Are you ready for the big reveal?
Sure.
Gavin Lux.
Oh, okay. Oh my God. Oh my God.
I mean, in hindsight, were my clues bad?
The lucky one, I hate you for it. It threw me so off track. No.
I thought it would give it away easily. It's like Lux.
Oh man.
Should I say
such a high-end prospect? That's the embarrassing part.
It's such a massive prospect.
Should I have said Luxy?
You gave us what his first name rhymes with.
I was like, who's Gavin? What Gavin is out there that's lucky? I don't know what Gavin Lucky. I told you.
You know what it really was? He said, I'm not sure he's a prospect anymore.
That made me think he was like 27 years old when he said that,
like
100%.
not so high end.
Because
I was like Rowdy Tellez.
I look at prospect lists and he's not listed anymore. So I don't.
He just hit off a qualification.
Yeah, he must have lost the qualification. So you're technically right, but that's just not what I was thinking.
So
but the rhymes. What did you say? Rhymes with Schmavin?
Yeah. I think I said Blavin, but
Blavin.
Yes,
Blavin
L
Lucky.
in there. Why did you add why not just say he rhymes with Kevin or Gavin?
Yeah, Kevin.
Why'd you put an L in there?
Kevin would have made sense.
It's all your
right?
fault, Frank.
It's
We're definitely.
Right. I mean,
we're definitely
have the
redirecting
excuse.
the blame here.
I said I'm not good at this, but that was amazing. That was
Welsh,
amazing.
this was basically a 7-minute game to find out will it ever happen for Gavin Lux? Will it happen in 2021? Come on, they won the World Series. Let's get some kids involved now, man. Who cares about winning anymore? Let's get the kids in.
I mean, I agree. You know what? It's funny. I did go to a Dodgers prospect because Edwin Rios is like a super deep guy of people that I would be looking at this year. I think Turner could be gone. Lux could. Now, it just gets it all funky. Muncy could go over to third, and I think Edwin Rios could play some serious at-bats at first base, and that is a dude that's going to hit some homers. But, I'm super discouraged. I've always been a little bit discouraged when I see Gavin Lux in person compared to the numbers you see on a page, because he really shines. He really when he is the overachiever at a level, he takes advantage of it. When he's on level playing field, at least what I've seen so far, it's a little bit discouraging. The power kind of disappears. His plate discipline goes away. Kind of like Dylan Carlson, kind of like what Dylan Carlson went through. For the Dodgers to give up like they did, I mean, I want you to think about this. The Angels held on with Joe Adell and what he did longer than the Dodgers gave any opportunity for Gavin Lux. And in an important year, they said, no, Kike Hernandez and Chris Taylor are going to do it. I'm worried that continues on to next season. And I think Gavin Lux might start in the minors next year, which is going to be infuriating. But he's still a great buy low guy because he has hit, he steals, he's at a prime position. Dodgers could always make a move off of him. He was a huge trade piece. So I would buy low. I'm tenuous, and I'm actually a little concerned to hear, is he really 182 in NFBC?
Yep.
I don't think there's any guarantees. No guarantees that he starts, especially after what happened this year. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but no guarantees. Though he was rocking some bombs. The Dodgers a couple times played some of their alt site video, and he was taking advantage. Tony Gonsolin, I think he actually took twice in one game, and it looked really, really good. But again, that's about when he's comfortable. And when he's not comfortable, he does not adjust well. So he might just be a little bit of a late bloomer. So that's why you buy low.
I'm kind of with you though, and being concerned how long it's going to take. Yeah. In a dynasty league where he was already his cost for me, his keeper cost for me was already beginning to escalate. I went ahead and moved him.
What'd you get?
I moved him and Mackenzie Gore. And it's a similar situation where once these guys reach the majors, their cost escalates very quickly. I moved them both to get Sonny Gray and Corbin Burns. Patrick Corbin. I'm sorry.
Oh, I would have rather been Patrick Corbin.
It felt better at the time. Patrick Corbin. I don't know that I'm going to get much out of him, but
that's a win now move. I mean, you paid a lot for Sonny Gray, and I'm very stubborn when it comes to trades like that, especially about top prospects. But yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing about Lux right now is he was at a peak. That's completely gone. I think it's bottom barrel right now. I think Dylan Carlson has more value right now, surprisingly, than Joe Adell or Gavin Lux. And I would take both of those still at this moment over Dylan Carlson. So Dynasty, it's a great time. I just don't know if 2021 is a great time for Gavin Lux. So I would fade that top 200 Gavin Lux. Give me more of a discount for sure.
He is the Welsh. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Is It The Welsh, and make sure you check out the In This League podcast as well as Prospect One. Welsh, before we let you go, just give us a name that nobody is talking about. One of the Welsh's sleepers, potentially a guy that you can get in a dynasty league, maybe on the cheap right now.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, one I want to say I teased a little bit. I'm just going to throw out a guy that doesn't seem remotely close to being able to be at the majors anytime soon. But I think I'm going to just do this real quick. In 2021, look out for Bobby Witt in deep drafts if you're doing that type of stuff. They're talking about, especially if in camps he ends up working in the outfield in, just in spring training, that could be to get him up soon. And he was a little bit later of a high school prospect. I think there's a possibility that he could be up in 2021. And that would be kind of my big, surprise shocker one. As far as a couple guys that no one are talking about, I mean, prospect people are talking about him, but look out for Tyler Freeman. Tyler Freeman with the Indians. And this kid has built muscle. He's got an insane walk to strikeout ratio. It's kind of similar to what Nick Madrigal does, but this guy has power and he can play multiple positions. And if they're going to trade off of Francisco Lindor, there's a real opportunity that Tyler Freeman could get some run this year. And just two others, I would throw out Jared Oliva with the Pirates, who has got power. He can hit and he runs like crazy. Former U of A prospect. He didn't get some run this past year, but he's a super, super underrated, talented player. And just someone no one's talking about is Leody Taveras with the Rangers, who had a surprisingly solid year. His speed is kind of tapered back, but it's there. His strikeouts dropped from where they were and they'd been concerning before. And he finally tapped into power after 4 years of kind of disappointment. And I've had a couple team scouts about a year and a half ago tell me, don't forget and don't be the person that gives up on Leody Taveras with other teams. By the way, this was a scout with another team, and Leody kind of did it. And I think that's a guy you should look at like deep, especially play those like 5 outfielder stuff. Look at Leody Taveras next year. So Oliva, Taveras, and Tyler Freeman with the Indians.
Great information as always. Dude, we could do 2-3 hours worth of podcasting right now with the Welsh. That's how fun it is.
As long as we don't do that game. Don't do that. We can't do it with that game again.
I'm sorry, guys.
Never.
Look, if he just gets playing time, you would consider him lucky. For the Welsh,
lucky.
For the Welsh and Scott White, I am Frank Stample. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball today on our YouTube channel. We'll be back again on Tuesday. Bye-bye.